Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Exponential Potential. We have quite a specialist edition today, continuing the theme throughout this month of revitalizing, resetting, revitalizing, and preparing. And Jen, it's absolutely brilliant to see you. Of course, as always. But actually, I'm really wanting to dive into this topic and explore where we go. I'm really keen to see how our audience can use this time, which is normally of a natural lull, or you're on holiday and kind of going into September and buying a new pencil case, because we all do that in September. School does you, but kind of just, how can people actually prepare for that fresh start? How can you break free of old patterns? How can you elevate going forward? So welcome.
Yes. Yeah, I think breaking free of old patterns is one of the hardest things to do. But when we do it, when we allow ourselves to do it, the impact that has on our lives and the way that our lives are elevated and enhanced is so worth the effort. So worth the effort.
Yeah. And this, for members of the audience, this is really building on some of the elements from Mag's talk last week, and going much deeper and starting to look at a range of patterns that we've got in our lives that are disrupting kind of we don't need there. And Jen, we talked about a balloon of fear, and actually you choose to blow that balloon up bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you realize that, then you realize you also have the power to make it shrink that down and get moving forward. So it was really helpful. And we were also reflecting on how sometimes in December, you've got the magical properties of the New Year's resolutions, of course, and you've got the momentum, your body's coming back awake after a sleep. But now, we're in the height of summer. We've got all of this yummy energy around us. We've got kind of the momentum, the build. So it feels like it's a good time to have this conversation.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really good time to reset the summer. Absolutely. Because we do have a bit of space usually, or we can certainly create that space. So yeah, I think delving into old patterns and noticing those old patterns, because most of us aren't even aware we have them.
So, I mean, when you're talking about old patterns, what kind of, give us some illustrations. What do you mean by old patterns?
So old patterns are things that we have learned over time. They're limiting unconscious behaviors that are based on a belief. And that belief is wired into our brains over time. And it's based on our upbringing. It's based on the experiences that we've had in the past. It's based on our culture, our family and social expectations. It comes from the relationships that we have, what we've seen and heard in the past, not just in childhood, but also through as we grow throughout our lives. And it just keeps on piling on, and the patterns are there to keep us safe. So the beliefs that we have of, well, if I do, for example, maybe when you were growing up, you felt like you were always being told off and you never did anything right. You were always in the wrong. You were always being told off. You're always in trouble. So when you get older, that belief is ingrained and wired into your brain, and your behavior, your behavior then becomes a pattern around that to keep you safe. So you deliberately do things unconsciously. You're not aware of it, but you are unconscious of a pattern behavior that you've created over time that will then not get you in trouble. So it might be that you don't speak up, that you become a wallflower because every time you do speak up or every time you do something, you're shut down in the past. So you kind of take, you diminish and squish your light. So that's one example. And there are many, many other ways that those patterns show up in life.
And I mean, I'm so curious around those beliefs, and I just want to kind of pick that a little bit before we move forward. But you talked about the experiences that you've had directly, but actually I think indirect experiences can be just as powerful in terms of setting those belief systems. So it could be the kind, what we pick up in the books perhaps, or in TV shows, or patterns that you've witnessed elsewhere. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, and then that's part of the cultural and social things that we see and we hear. And social media today is a massive element of that. I'm watching at the moment on Netflix the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
Ah, yes.
And it's really interesting. They are perfection. They got perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect bodies. But the down, and they're all thin, they have to be a certain weight. They can't put any weight on. And they are, these girls come from all over the States to be a Dallas Cowboy, and they don't even get paid very much. It's minimal amount they get paid, but they all squash themselves into this, what they believe is to be the perfect body, the perfect look. I mean, they're amazing dancers and they're incredibly fit. And some of them, a lot of them are very, they've got degrees and things. So they're not dumb blondes, they're not dumb brunettes. They've got brains, but they're so drawn into this idol, they idolize these cheerleaders. And it's that kind of image that gets put out across social media. We see it all the time. And when we don't feel that we fit into that perfectness, women especially, men too, but women especially, that's where we have eating disorders and where we beat ourselves up and we have body issue images and we don't feel good enough because we're not beautiful enough or we're not slim enough. So that in terms of social and what we see on TV, what we're constantly fed, has a big impact on how we are. And the other thing is, there is our ancestral line. What our parents went through, what our mothers went through, our grandmas, our great grandmas. So that, we say a lot of the time we're not born with these behaviors, that we're born with love, but actually there is an element that is within our DNA that we carry.
Yeah. So I guess it's the belief system, it's the pattern that we have understood to be the pattern, the way to be human.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the way our perception is really big around this. So as a 6-year-old child or a 10-year-old child, for example, my parents, they got divorced when I was 12 and dad left.
Yeah.
So as a 12-year-old, my perception was, well, my dad left me. And that happens all the time. Or your dad wasn't around. So therefore, my dad left me. He can't love me enough, because if he loved me enough, he would have stayed. Now I'm not good enough and I'm not lovable. And I know that as an adult, we do know that as an adult, that that's not true, but yet we still have these patterns and behaviors that relate to that old belief because we're unaware of it, we're unconscious of it.
And to be able to be aware of it in the way that you have there, I imagine that's taken a great deal of honesty and examination, because that pattern, you wouldn't necessarily connect it to behaviors if they're subconscious, if they're so deep. How do you become aware of the patterns?
I think you've got to notice what is showing up in your life. So for example, with the patterns around my dad, and my brothers bullied me as well. I mean, they thought they were just teasing and making fun, and they thought it was hilarious. But again, I felt that they didn't love me, because if they loved me, they wouldn't be so mean to me, because it was constant barrage of teasing and calling names and laughing at me. But that was their way of showing love. So that sort of plays out in, well, one, I wanted to keep myself safe. I wanted to feel that I was lovable, and I was constantly seeking approval. So that showed up in my career, in my relationships, in how my self-esteem, looking for love in all the wrong places, attracting complete bad boys. And there are good elements of that as well. And I'll go back to your question in a moment. So because I didn't feel like I was good enough or lovable enough, that I wanted to prove to my dad and say, here I am, Dad, look at what I've done. I was constantly pushing myself to be the best that I could in everything. I remember when I was away, I was at boarding school, and we were doing a garden party. It was a dancing school, and there was a dance, we were all in dancing. It was my first year. My dad promised me he would be there, and he wasn't. And I was absolutely brokenhearted that he wasn't there. So again, another layer of, oh, my dad doesn't love me. So it took quite a long time for me to realize the behaviors that I had. So one night stands, always looking for love, and thinking that that was the way I would get it. Pushing myself at work, striving to do better. I was always in the top salespeople at work, always pushing. And then I'd get a promotion. That wasn't good enough. I needed another promotion. And I set myself very high targets, and I achieved them. I was aiming to be a sales or marketing director by the time I was 25. I hit it when I was 30. I was VP of sales and marketing by the time I was 30. So there's a good element, there's a good part of that, in that it drives you to be better. But we'll talk about the problems in a minute. But going back to realizing my behavior was to do with that, the awareness, how to create awareness around it, is to notice what shows up in your life. So to notice if you are attracting, notice if your relationships are crappy. And it's a pattern, it happens all the time. To notice that you feel like you want to be center of attention all the time, that you want to be seen and front and center. Or notice that you're cowering away and you feel anxious about being seen. So it's noticing those behaviors, and if it's a pattern, if it repeats regularly, noticing the patterns in terms of, when you notice yourself going, oh, that always happens to me, or I always do that, or I'm always attracting this, or why don't things work out for me? It's noticing that and going, okay, so one, I am actually in control and I have power. I always have power. But two, why is that happening for me? So what really sort of shone the light on me wasn't through my work, because I still strive to be really good at what I do. It's important to me, and that's not a bad thing, but not to the point of where I'm burning out and feeling exhausted. But what I noticed was I'd been married twice, both unhappy marriages. And then I was always attracting relationships that weren't optimum, shall we say. They were pretty rubbish. And it's like, okay, so the common denominator of that is what? And I realized the common denominator is me. So if something keeps happening to you, look at what's the common denominator, and it's usually you. And it's like, okay, so what am I doing for that to happen? Because it's not the other person. You're attracting that person, or you're attracting that situation into your life because you're behaving a certain way.
And I mean, you've got to be really careful around language with this, and that kind of it's around ownership and empowerment, I guess, rather than shaming or blaming.
Yes.
You know, kind of in terms of, well, of course you have all these things happen because that must drive the behavior further and further down.
Yeah, because the more you're in victim mode, the more you become a victim, because you think it's everybody else's fault. And it's using that language consciously. And why does this always happen to me? Instead of saying, what can I do about it? And I really struggle with this, instead of, I'm getting better at this. So language is really key. And it's also noticing what triggers you. What are the areas that you get really triggered, that get you emotional, that get you angry, that get you fuming and steam coming out your ears? And that's an ideal opportunity to look at why that's triggering you. And it's always an opportunity to heal and release something. It's time, when you're triggered, it's time for something to be let go and to be released. It's also can be a mirror. So it's like, okay, that's really triggering me. I don't like that about that person, or I don't like about, what is it in me? Because the things that trigger us most usually are a highlight, one, for something to be healed, but two, to bring you awareness that you do that as well. Yeah. And also the opposite of that is, what do you recognize in other people that you really love? Because if you recognize that in somebody, you also have that ability, you will also that way as well. Carl Jung talks of that, in terms of, you cannot recognize a behavior in somebody else unless it's within you.
So it's the opportunity for you to echo that behavior, for that to kind of resonate and bring that through for you.
Yeah. So the sort of behaviors as well that are quite prevalent in this day and age. I'm sure you can think of some as well, Claire. I'll ask you, and then you can answer if you need a little bit of time. But what sort of behavior patterns have you noticed in your life that have created a bit of strife or stress or overwhelm?
Well, I can tell you around things like triggering or triggers, and there's definitely something around how, I get really annoyed about how people act when they're parking their cars like really irresponsibly, and it's just like all over double yellow lines, or there's an ambulance that was parked on a double yellow line with the engine on because the driver was going off to one side to have a cigarette, and that really got me annoyed, because it's like, why am I being put out because you're having a cigarette because I'm having to walk all the way around? So there's triggers like that are coming through at the moment, and what I'm going through is, hang on. What's going on?
Why is that triggering me? What's underneath that?
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of it's almost like a disrespectful action, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's probably bashing against a value from my perspective. So it's a reminder of a value that I've got, which is around respect and fairness, and sometimes following rules is a demonstration of fairness, because rules are meant to embody fairness, which is pedestrians have got a right to walk on a pavement and not get run over because people have parked crazily. So it's definitely a kind of value reminder in that. There's probably also a bit of a reminder that in different parts of my life, my own boundaries are stretched by people overstepping boundaries. And so kind of somebody doing that there is like it's like another person that's doing it.
And do you
Like,
feel that they're doing it to you?
hang on.
Do you feel that they're doing it to you?
Not me or
Right.
not me personally, but a kind of, in terms of other boundaries, I'm letting them cross the boundaries. So yeah.
So it is highlighting an area in your life where people haven't respected your boundaries and your values.
Well,
So
it's like a teenage boy, Tyler, blaming me for having to walk to school because I didn't run up the stairs to help him find his headphones because he was late for the bus. Yeah, it's like, which led to lots of shouting from his part and swearing at me. But again, it's like no, it's, my boundaries are I don't run around after you. You're growing.
yeah. Yeah, and that's an like you say, when you're triggered, it's an opportunity to go, okay, what's that showing me? And what can I do about it? And you had a conversation, you're like, hang on, no, these are my boundaries, and you were very clear. Whereas a lot of people would be sort of, oh yeah, okay, I'll come and help you. But that's kind of a highlight, it's an alert to show you that there's some behavior that can change, that there's an opportunity to mend that, to release it, to behave differently. So some of the things I think in terms of the behaviors to look out for, so you want to notice behaviors like, where do you people please? Where do you not, or who do you not want to rock the boat with? How often are you bending over backwards to make sure everybody else is okay? And where are you on that pecking order? Approval and validation are big ones as well. So you're looking outside of yourself for other people to praise you. And yes, it's great to feel appreciated and praised, but it's when you are always looking outside yourself for somebody else to validate your worth, your value, and that you've done a good job. So notice that, because we don't always need people to tell us we've done a good job. That can come from when we look outside of ourselves for approval and validation, that comes back to that we're not good enough. And then whether you second guess yourself and criticize yourself, which is very strongly linked to approval and validation. Are you asking lots of are you in a habit of asking lots of different people advice about the same thing? Because you don't trust your own instincts, you don't trust yourself. And the more you do that, the less you trust yourself. The more you go within and ask yourself, the more it will prove to you that actually you have the answers within. And then the whole criticizing yourself and putting yourself down constantly is, we all do, but some of us do it a lot more. And it's lovely when you don't.
So on the rational side, there'll be many listeners who recognize those behaviors and go, yes, but I want a harmonious home, or yes, but that has led to me having 2 degrees. Yes, and they've pulled through, kind of lots of reasons why that behavior has been quite healthy and productive and led to success. But perhaps we can look at, some of the unseen impacts. What impact can these old patterns have on your life, at work, at home, in relationships?
And yeah, you're absolutely right, Claire, that there are lots of benefits that come from that. But providing it's not creating a negative impact, because there are a lot of positive impacts. Like you say, high achievers, providing you are enjoying what you're doing and you feel it's filling your cup, but it's when it's the other side of that, the darker side of that. So for example, perfectionism, if you're too perfect, you will always be stuck in procrastination and you won't ever put anything out there because it's not good enough. I need to tweak it. And I'm good at that. And it's like being really strict with yourself and going, right, no, this is enough. Stop already. But yeah, so the things that really affect us when we're in that frame, when we're seeing those behaviors or we are noticing those behaviors, you start to feel quite drained. that's a good, you start to feel overwhelmed and more stressed. You feel very depleted, especially as a people pleaser. If you're constantly giving, you start to feel obligated and depleted.
Yeah.
Sleepless nights, if you're a worrier, worrying about what other people think, and that keeps you awake at night, or you're just worrying in general. If it can lead, it leads to burnout when you're constantly pushing yourself. Relationships is a big one, in terms of if you're always looking for somebody to criticize you, because you're used to, when you were younger, you got criticized a lot by parents or brothers or whoever it might be, by a teacher. In your relationships, whether that's at work or home, you're constantly looking out and looking and collecting evidence of people criticizing you, so you don't see the other side of it, and you take criticism incredibly personally, and that affects your relationship with that other person. It creates discord, and it can blow up into a really toxic relationship, which is completely unnecessary.
Yeah. And I guess in relationships, you're at risk of, how to put this in a way, the relationship, the view that you have about the relationship isn't based on reality. It's based on your perception about what might be going on in the relationship. So your mind creates these holes, and then you fill in all of the blanks.
Yeah.
And jump to conclusions, and
Yeah.
actually factually none of it happened. You made it worse. You aggravated a situation.
Yeah, I mean, there's one example around Facebook. Somebody, and this isn't me, but this is an interesting story. Somebody had an experience where their boyfriend was liking somebody else's posts, a woman's posts. So now in her relationships, her future relationships, she thinks because somebody has liked a post of somebody else, that means they're going to have an affair with that person. But it did happen once to her, it doesn't matter, but her behavior then becomes incredibly insecure, and very blame, and you don't love me because you do this and you do that, and that's that whole blame game, and it's very easy to go down that spiral, and then you just go into the next relationship and carry it all with you. It's lovely.
So I can understand how these are, hardwired in, and then just reinforced, or buried underneath all of the logical evidence that you gather and twist and create and pile upon that. What can you do? It's like without years of therapy.
Yeah. Well, there is the good news, you can do something. You are in control of that. We always have power within us. So firstly, when somebody, a lot of it is around approval and feeling not good enough because people have criticized you or said something to you. But know when someone's treating you in a certain way or criticize, it's not personal as much as it feels personal. They are a fallible human being with their own issues, hang-ups, and insecurities. And they might be lashing out at you, or they're coming from a place of their own personal judgments. So they are doing the best they can with the tools that they have. So it's not always about you.
Well, and also, to build on that, because I am that kind of leader, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's the ambition that I've had for other people. I can see how bloody amazing they are. I really want to help them to strive and go forward and further and further and further, which comes from a place of, it's intentionally from love and drive and support and kind of helping them become the person that I can see. But actually it probably does come across as criticism in the delivery at times, and that's not intended.
And most criticism or advice, suggestion do come from a place of love. because that person cares about you enough to pay attention to you. They just don't have the communication skills necessarily, or the awareness to put it to you that in a way that you can hear it without feeling criticized.
Yeah.
Also, know you have a choice. You always get to choose how you behave, and know that at any point in time you can change your behavior. So asking questions like, so first of all, you have to be aware. If you're not aware of what you're doing and your behaviors and how you're reacting, you can't change anything. So it's noticing and creating awareness about the patterns that are showing up in your life, knowing you have a choice, and then asking yourself, well, how do I want to be in life? How do I want to change that? What do I want to do that's different? How do I want to be? What do I want? Do I want to feel more fulfilled? Do I want to be happy? Do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? What matters? What's most important? Notice when you are looking for negative evidence and negativity, and start looking at the flip side of that, and start looking at the positive. And a lot of people need help with those things. They need help to change that behavior, because that behavior can be quite ingrained. So that's, the way they feel about something can be changed. I use a really good technique to help shift behavior from something where they know they're behaving in a certain way, which makes them feel heavy and unsettled, and it doesn't feel very good, and help them shift that with a new behavior that feels uplifting and positive. It's like a 15-minute technique. It's brilliant. It's really powerful. But some of the things, you can breathe and set yourself intentions in the morning. Take some space for yourself and breathe. Deepak Chopra recommends that you just choose 3 things of how you want to be that day. Do I want to be more compassionate? Do I want to be more action orientated? Do I want to have more focus? Do I want to have more grace for myself and others? Do I want to feel more joyful today? Do I want to make it important that I'm not right all the time?
Almost like a to-be list rather than a to-do list.
Yes. Yeah. So it's simple steps. I mean, they're simple, but they're not always easy.
Yeah, it's how you can shift from that negative thought to a positive feeling. That's one of the trickiest things. I mean, we talked about that a little bit with Mags, kind of the awareness, but actually making the very conscious shift and bringing in those feelings are key. So I really like the pull through of this to be. How do you want to be?
What do you want to show up in your life? And the more you focus on feeling good, the more you will feel good. So it's important to realize what are the things that make you feel good, who are the people that make you feel good, and do them. We talk about gratitude a lot. It's a really simple tool. It's one of the most powerful, easiest tools you can do. Is just focus on one thing and really allow yourself to feel gratitude, because you need to change and shift your vibration. And it doesn't just come through thought, it comes from doing, it comes from actioning and being that way.
Yeah. And if we are seeing those patterns in others, what can we do?
You can have a conversation, but that conversation needs to be really neutral, without blame, and come from a place of love instead of fear and control, and just say to that person, can we have a chat? I want to understand there's something that's showing up, and I want to understand it better, so that we can create a better relationship, so that we can move forward, so that we can let that go. And they may not even be aware, and they may get very defensive. So that's why it's so important for the blame game to stay hidden in a box buried deep beneath the earth.
But it's the reason why I wrote it, and it's not intended as a confessional, but very often within our, you know, romantic relationships or our closest family relationships, you know, people will have similar issues going on.
Yeah.
You know, for example, eating issues or weight issues, and they might have similar. And if one person goes, right, I'm going to make the change, and works completely independently, it's not necessarily changing the system around you. And so if you're seeing it in somebody else, it's likely it's affecting you as well. How do you really
I think you have that conversation and you open it with how much you love that person. And around eating, it's interesting because, you know, if we don't take care of ourselves, that will have a massive impact on our health. And do they want to be do you want the, you know, again, it's their choice. You can't make somebody do anything they don't want to do. But would they prefer to be really healthy and feel good and have longevity? Or do they want to put themselves in an early grave eating the way they're continuing to eat? You know, what is it you want? What are the, and even you know, put it to them, what are the consequences of you continuing to do what you're doing? For you, for us, for whatever it might be, and where do you want to be? And do you want any support? Do you want me just to let you get on with it? Or because you can continue doing what you're doing, you can't make, you know, and criticizing someone and saying, oh, you shouldn't be eating that, and oh gosh, it's more of, what do you see the consequences of you continuing to eat and do what you're doing?
Yeah.
And where, and would you like to change that? Would you want to be, you know, not have that happen, not feel 30 pounds heavier and heart attack material or stroke material? I had a client the other day who's looking at losing weight, and she had a really open heart-to-heart conversation about with her husband, and he turned around and he said, I don't want to end up looking after an invalid. And it's a real thing, you know. We talked about that, and I said, well, is that a true statement? And it is a true statement.
Yeah.
And
and it's a brave statement, but actually it's a statement you want to know and understand now rather than 15 years down the line.
Because it's a lot harder when it's down the road. Yes. But that is a real consequence. That is a truth. That was his truth. And you know, it upset her, and I said, but was it true? And is it because he loves you so much? He wants you to be healthy. He wants you to do things together. He wants you to be fit.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing for her to hear, and she realized that. You know, I said, was that a good thing for you to hear, as upsetting as it was? And she said, yes, it made a difference. So sometimes not kind advice isn't always good advice. Sometimes it's the advice you don't want to hear is the kindest advice you can give.
Oh, Jen, what's come through really, really strongly for this conversation is actually this challenge, this gauntlet that's been thrown down to say, look, you know, have an honest reflection about who you are, what's getting in your way, and choose whether you want to be happy, successful, loved, you know, kind of any of those adjectives that you want to put in. There's a very strong element of choice in there. But I want to kind of honor the practical support, the kind of emotional aspects that you've given today in such a nurturing way. It, as you say, it's not kind advice isn't necessarily what you want to hear. It's you know, how do I help you grow? How do I help you blossom? How do I help you thrive and be the best that you can? So how can people who've perhaps resonated with this conversation, who are kind of perhaps recognizing that they may have some of these old patterns that they want to release, how can they work with you? How can they find out what you're doing?
I have my website, which is in the link. I help women, women that want sustainable success, that want to feel fulfilled, but also want freedom and joy. Specific, and it's really specializing in helping women with overwhelm and anxiety. So most people at this stage that want to make a difference are usually at that point of overwhelm, burnout, anxiety, very high stress levels. So have a look at my website. There's also a free gift around how to create balance and joy in your life. And there's also another gift around anxiety as well. So if anxiety is a big thing for you, there's a really good guide around the 3 reasons you're stuck in anxiety and how to break free for good. But yeah, and also you can reach out to me by email or WhatsApp and have a conversation with me to see if I can help you. But I am really passionate about helping people really elevate and enhance their lives and live the life that they dream of living, with that freedom, joy, fulfillment.
So one last key message for listeners today.
Awareness is key if you want to make change, and change is possible. Yeah.
Oh, just yummy. Jen, thank you so much. It's been an episode that has flowed, but actually there's been a lot of meaty content in there. Some really deep content in there. So I'd encourage you as a listener to perhaps listen again or pull through which aspects were strongest for you. And please let us know if there's anything that changes, anything that you've picked up, any patterns you're stuck in that you recognize. It helps everybody to learn and to grow. But it's just been lovely to see you, and we wish you all the best. Cheers.
Thank you, Claire. Bye.
Oh, you can definitely edit this out. I got my eyes like going.
Hang on a second. I haven't stopped the recording, but that's okay. Dom can edit that out.